Today, whilst playing a game of League of Legends, I became fascinated by the minions. What exactly is their AI designed to do? Minions are a very common occurrence in MOBA games, however I feel they are often overlooked, with the exception of their gold generating capabilities. I'm interested enough that I want to do a deep dive of the inner workings of these bots and recreate my own. I actually found the exact information that I was looking for when I visited the League of Legends wiki. The minions' behavior seems to be that if there is an enemy, they will attack. However, if there are multiple enemies, the minion will follow a determined priority system for which enemy will be attacked. While this system is not exactly the same in every game, a similar convention is generally followed. This leaves me with the question, how difficult would it be to implement a system like this? I of course don't know the inner framework of these games, so I'll have to take some creative liberty and design my own ecosystem to make this possible. The first part of this problem that I want to tackle is going to be teaching the minions to follow a path that will always move toward forward progress if there isn't an enemy. However, one important thing to consider before I can implement this is pathfinding. Without pathfinding, our minions will either not move at all, walk straight into walls, or clip through walls, all of which are not exactly preferable. I implemented pathfinding using the nav mesh assets. It works exceptionally well. Now with that up and running, I am working on the problem of the minion's path, which is actually a two-part problem. The first part of the problem is finding a way for the minion to know where it needs to be going, meaning it always makes forward progress towards the other team's base. The second problem is if the minion gets lost out of its lane, it needs to be able to find its way back to resume the path. My first concept for this was a node system along the path to serve as checkpoints. I'm going to try implementing this and see how it goes. Worst case scenario, I'll learn a way not to do it. The checkpoint system thus far seems promising. I did, however, get distracted when looking for an environment to test in. After 15 minutes of distraction, I am now proud to present
Blockier Rift.
Blockier Rift. With that little distraction out of the way, now is probably a good time to get the minions targeting enemies. I'm going to start this by creating two types of minion prefab, one for blue side and one for red. These will be distinguished by color for players and by tag for scripting purposes. I ran into a few issues implementing the enemy detection system for minions. One in particular was getting in the way to query the objects around the minion in an optimized way that didn't crash Unity. Luckily, after some brief Google searches, I found a method that is fairly optimal for now. The minions will update their target every second. This delay seems short enough to not feel too awkward, but long enough that it won't lag the game checking collisions. After spending a little more time fixing the logic, I now have it to where if a minion sees an enemy within its range, it will switch its priority to that enemy. It's at this point where decisions that I make can carry long consequences through this project. I need to decide a way to implement the health system that won't be shooting myself in the foot later. I think I'm going to create a health-specific script that characters, minions, and towers can access when doing damage. At this point, Unity has crashed on me about 5 times, for reasons I'm not quite sure of, but it was definitely getting annoying, so I decided this was a good point to take a break and go to sleep, as it was definitely getting pretty late. Well, it's the next morning now and I'm getting back to work. I did lose some progress due to the crashes last night, but I think taking a step back gave me a better way to implement the features I was working on. After the many crashes and squashed bugs, it is very satisfying to finally see the minions properly pathing to the lane and fighting each other. I now want to implement them to attack the towers, which luckily shouldn't take too long, thanks to how I designed their detection system. I am so happy that I went through the pain of developing the minion targeting system, because it took all of 5 seconds to implement towers in the minion system. Thank you, Previous Jacob. With that, I'm going to implement a system for towers to shoot. After that, I'll make the inhibitor and nexus targetable. I have now implemented inhibitors in the nexus. However, it is hard to see because I haven't actually gotten a health bar system working yet, but that's a project for another time. So now the minions all spawn in waves of 8 every 30 seconds. I have combat disabled right now for testing purposes, but let's give this a shot with combat enabled.
Cause I've been running from the pain, smoking gas, I'm all alone, and don't you ask if I'm okay, cause I've been running from the pain, smoking gas, I'm all alone, and don't you ask if I'm okay.
At this point, I'm extremely happy with how it has come out, and I don't feel much more desire to continue past this point. I do want to go over things that I felt went as I had hoped, and things that I would change if I were to implement this into a more long-term project. While the pathing of the minions did work, there were some quirks, and occasionally the minions would go off in directions not expected. I think this could be quite simply solved by adding more nodes for the minions to path to. Another function that I felt could have been done better would be the timing on the minions' decisions. I slowed them down to make one decision per 2 seconds to limit the processing of nearby enemies. The downsides of this were that sometimes a tower would be destroyed, leading the minions to awkwardly stand there for half a second before the next wave of decisions. I think a fairly simple fix to this could be to just force an update on the pathing when the minion's target is destroyed or if a node is reached. The minion spawn system was fairly modular, and I think I took a good approach to it. However, as this was near the end of the project, I knew that I didn't need to be too extensive, so if this were to be a full project, I would definitely modify that component to allow for flexibility. This would mean that I could add casters, cannons, and different routes for other lanes easily, as currently it would take some tedious work to include those. Lastly, I think that it could be enjoyable to develop my own pathfinding engine for this to run off. That's not to say that the nav mesh was in any way holding me back in this project, as it was massively helpful. I just think that it would be a fun challenge to create a system where I could entirely control the pathing of units. This doesn't mean that I would want to reinvent the wheel. I'd of course use a known pathfinding algorithm, like Dijkstra or A-star. Overall, I would say that this project was a success at teaching me more about pathfinding systems, minion logic, and the whole processes behind the popular MOBAs that we all love, and hate, to play. I think attempting to recreate mechanics like this allows me to stop taking the mechanics in these games for granted, as it opens a window into the hours of hard work that went into creating the games that we enjoy. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed.